Well, good evening and welcome to this month's edition of The Edge. I'm your host, as always, Trevor Lewington. Thanks so much for joining us. As you know, on the third Thursday, we're talking to community and business leaders right here in Southern Alberta. All of these folks are having an impact and they're providing insights that help you build your community, help you build your business, or help you build your life. Now, whether you got here by Roku TV or YouTube or the website, look, we don't care how you got here. We're just really grateful that you joined us this evening. And tonight, I'm super excited to have my friend and former colleague, Renae Barlow, who's in the role now of Vice President of SuperQ Quantum Computing. Did I get that right?
Global Ecosystems.
And you're the Vice President of Global Ecosystems for SuperQ. Yeah. We are going to unpack exactly what that means in a minute. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking time out of the busy Christmas season to join me.
I'm thrilled to be here today. Thank you.
You and I have spent the better part of a decade together at Economic Development Lethbridge before we both found separate paths out of that. Maybe you can just talk a little bit about your background, because I think it's, people might see quantum computing and vice president and global ecosystems and assume you've got an AI background or you've got a computer programming background. And I think, when people find out that your specialty started in critters, that maybe is a bit of a mind-blowing thing. So can you talk a little bit about your background?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for asking. So I started, I'm from Ontario originally, so don't hold that against me. But I'm converted now, but I grew up in Ontario in Lake Country. So my first career was animal health technology. So I did spend 5 years in large and small animal. Did a lot of work with dairy cattle, and that was a big brucellosis testing in Ontario. So a lot of hard work, and really enjoyed the animal part of it. Then I moved into working with people with disabilities. From there, because animal health technology actually doesn't pay very well. So it wasn't actually, you don't know when you're first graduating and going to college and doing these things.
I'm going to work with animals.
Right? And so I had to do something that actually made me a little bit more.
Okay.
And so I moved into that. Then I worked for an organization that was for family and children, toy libraries, childcare. And so I went to work there and was the administrative person, then within a couple of years became the executive director of that. So always been sort of in organizations and looking at different ways to manage and operate. At the time I was a divorced single mom, so having a toy library and a home care program was something that really worked for me. And then I realized I really didn't want to stay in a tourist town with the culture that was there in sort of Lake Country.
And the cyclical economy, it's a tough gig, right?
Yeah, it's a tough gig, and it was hard on families and that. And I had a friend, she had moved out to Calgary. She was doing a 2-year program at Mount Royal. And I said, well, why don't we just come out and I'll spend a year, because I was finished my term with this executive director position. And I came to Alberta and never left. And so from there, I went to work with the Canadian Paraplegic Association. I was actually a job developer. So if you could move your little finger, I had to find a job for you. So anybody with a catastrophic injury.
Wow.
That was
I got to imagine there were some tough stories to hear.
Yeah, there really was, but very resilient, a lot of resilience, but then started to really understand sort of that rehabilitation environment from there, right? So, but that was a tough job. I left that to take on some other of my own companies. So I worked with 2 people. One was deaf, and we did diversity training. So I have my level 4 sign language, which I couldn't communicate today if my life depended on it. But at one time you had that skill. I still know the sign for ASL, but and then the other partner, he was a paraplegic. He was actually from Lethbridge, and we formed a company to do diversity training across Canada. Okay. And so we did that for a while. We got some grants to do that. We hired people with disabilities to do the work. So I wasn't telling you what it was like to work with somebody with a vision loss. I'd actually bring somebody with a vision loss to talk to you about what that experience was.
Interesting. Okay.
From there, yeah. And then the other company that I created and worked with 2 partners was on organizational development, and one of the partners was a whitewater rafting guide. So we did team building on the Kananaskis on the whitewater from there, and I was doing all the work in the background while he was doing that. And then we had another person that was helping with that, of doing some of the programming and stuff around the organizational change, and did that. And then I was also running women retreats in Kananaskis.
Okay.
So we were doing the Wild Heart Women weekends. And so I would rent a lodge, and I'd bring in practitioners to do a whole bunch of self-care kind of work and do that. I had about 100 people. We were up in just around in Kananaskis at a lodge there doing that. So those were some companies that I was doing. I then moved into working with some people with developmental disabilities and helping with organizational change there and having to help them restructure some things, and sort of ended up doing that kind of work. And then an interesting job came up at Petland.
Back to the animals. It's funny how these things come full circle.
Right? And they were looking for someone to start a foundation. So I had the nonprofit management background. I had the animal health background. And so I went and started to create the foundation, the Pets for Life. And I spent the next year and a half working and rescuing animals from across southern Alberta. And that's where I would actually come down here, and I was actually met with Blood Tribe Council to officially be their sort of dog catcher. And so I would just go and find the dogs that are on the side of the road or that needed to be rehomed. And we had a rehabilitation facility in Fort Macleod where they would go, they'd be spayed, neutered, done their basic training, and then I would take them up to the 6 stores in Petland and write up their descriptions and get them trained up and adopted out. And so I rescued about 1,800 animals in that time.
Like almost 2,000.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, cats and dogs. And never got bit, never, like they were just amazing animals. And it was a really amazing experience, but it burnt out a little bit from that. So that
would be tough.
Kind of tough. Yeah. So I moved on to that too. So I've had a lot of different careers. There was a broadcasting studio that was worked with volunteers to do reading of newspapers every day. Okay. And because then you couldn't record newspapers, right? So if you were vision loss, you actually couldn't read the local paper. So we would have volunteers come in. It was called voice print, and they would read the papers in the morning in Calgary and in Edmonton. And they would read the paper. Those would be recorded and then broadcast over a television network of the Disability Network. And it was right across Canada. So there was all of these studios right across Canada that were doing these recordings every day. So I was hired as a coordinator for Alberta. So I ran the Calgary and Edmonton studio. And then I discovered Lethbridge and realized that there was all of these local papers that nobody was actually getting to read. So I came down and opened a studio here. And that's how I discovered Lethbridge.
Okay.
So I hired people here to be the coordinators, whose wife actually came and worked for EDL with Sandra. So it was Mark that I worked with originally. That was the volunteer coordinator there. And that's how I came to being at EDL. So as the nonprofit coordinator for that, I volunteered for EDL to be on the board to represent the nonprofit sector. And that's how I came to be working for Economic Development Lethbridge. And that was exactly the same time we decided to build Tecconnect. And so we've spent, I ended up getting hired by EDL.
So you were a board member to start with and then became staff.
Then became staff.
Okay.
Because we were starting to build the incubator and they needed to backfill for the business development position. And so I took that on. And I was looking for things because now the technology was catching up with the studio, with the reading, and there was no longer needing to have volunteers, right? So that it was I could see it coming, so I needed to find something else to do.
So you have this whole studio set up, this whole process that you can see on the horizon. Technology is quickly going to eliminate a need for that entirely.
Right. So that was kind of my first introduction to technology and starting to understand the impact that was going to have. And so, what I did forget to talk about, the other thing I did in Calgary was to start the first Entrepreneurs with Disabilities program in Calgary. It was part of a Champions steering committee group there, and also helped to create a program for entrepreneurs with mental health issues. So I was also doing that while I was doing the other 3 companies from that. So when Tecconnect was looking like they were going to be needing someone to run the incubator, I said, hey, I've started my own companies. I've run programs for people with mental health issues and people with disabilities. I think I could probably manage technology entrepreneurs, right? So we started with geospatial, and so I started to run the incubator back in 2012.
Now, you've also been, the time that I've known you, certainly a champion for entrepreneurs at Tecconnect, Lethbridge's, technology incubator, the hub for entrepreneurship. You've been very passionate about coaching entrepreneurs, but I'm assuming it comes from a bit of your background in terms of working with people with disabilities, that you're very passionate about underrepresented groups and ensuring people that maybe don't have the same opportunities as you and I might, that they're lifted up and able to access those services. Is that sort of where that passion comes from, is all of that social services kind of history in your career, as well as supporting entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I think you could see where programs that are supposed to be designed for everyone didn't meet the need, right? I also came to it because I lived as divorced a woman in the 80s with no enforcement on child care, was dependent on social services. And so I lived in poverty.
Lived experience.
I literally lived experience in poverty. I went, that's not something I want anyone else to have to live through. It was really hard. And that, coupled with working with people with disabilities, working with underrepresented groups, was the driver for me to always make sure that people felt they had a level playing field and they were treated with respect, right? And that, because I had experienced of what that isn't. And so that was also the passion that came through with Indigenous and working with Indigenous populations too, of that lack of respect or lack of wanting to work with that group. I was determined and that was going to level the playing field from there. So that's where that comes from.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. I think, it's interesting to look at your career. It's similar to mine in that every prior experience I've had culminated in my current roles, right? That everything seems to feed into the next one. And I think, especially for the students that are watching or folks that are early in their career, sometimes you feel like you have to be able to see the whole ladder or the whole staircase instead of just the first step, because the rest will emerge. And you don't always know how it's going to fit, but it does. Ultimately, you just have to trust that the path will be there.
I never would have done and written a job description to be an incubator manager.
Didn't even know what that was,
in
right?
Emerging tech, right? It was like, that was a growth experience to have, but it was because I had done some of those things. It was an easy yes of like, I think I can probably do this, right? So it's always that stretching, just of what's the next thing that you can do in it, and it's a stretch, but can you do it and go try it, right? Yeah.
So speaking of stretching, go from an incubator manager, vice president of entrepreneurship and innovation and economic development, Lethbridge, supporting these programs, building an ecosystem, and then this opportunity around Canada's first quantum computing hub pops up. Can you talk a little bit about how that emerged and sort of maybe where that's led you now to?
Yeah, so the entrepreneur that started the Quantum Super Hub was an entrepreneur I'd worked with about 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay.
He was Dr. Muhammad Khan was a professor at the university, and I met him when I was working on the Women in STEM program. So we had 3 years of promoting women in science, technology, engineering, and math.
A Made in Southern Alberta solution for a Made in Southern Alberta kind of...
Women who wanted to be in STEM had to travel to Calgary, Edmonton to do anything. We really wanted to make those resources here. He helped me do that in spades. Like, he was such a support. He was all about helping me create programs, teaching. He came to Tecconnect to teach. He had anything I needed, he was making that available. And so when he left Lethbridge and then started another company, but he was in Tecconnect for a while with another entrepreneur, and so I was helping them develop that business. And again, you don't always know what you're doing to how you're impacting someone's life until later, when he came back to me and said, you're the reason why I became an entrepreneur and left the academic, because I could see the path. Right. And I went, wow, that's amazing.
That's powerful.
Right? Really powerful.
Someone you're coaching is successful and comes back to say, you need to be a part of my team.
Right. Yeah. And so then when he came to me and said, okay, we've developed this platform for quantum, and I knew quantum was coming, but it's still, like everybody else was thinking, it was still 5-10 years out. And he goes, actually, I have it today. I'm like, okay, I'm listening. And he came and said, we can put a quantum super hub in Tecconnect. And I'm going, I'm there, I'm on it. Tell me how this works. Right. And so once I understood how you could access the platform and what the hybrid modeling was like and how it could be helping solve complex problems for business, we needed to have that in Tecconnect. We needed that for our region. We needed that for the competitiveness, and I knew we had to do it. So I created the model for engaging business to come in and understand and get educated and aware of how you could use these emerging technologies, which is the same trajectory that we'd used with when we were starting to understand geospatial, when we're starting to understand blockchain, that not cryptocurrency, but smart contracts. And then we moved into AI, and we were educating around AI. And then the quantum was just the next step. And so now we could see it all converging together. Right. And so it was just like, this is gold, right? So when I created the model, SuperQ Quantum Computing had the platform, but they were doing a traditional kind of way forward in how you were working with licenses and doing this. The Quantum Super Hub then became the idea of, if we could do that in this local community, because we then had companies coming in to understand how that they could be optimizing using this.
The hub creates an access point, right? It's a spot that people in Southern Alberta can come to, test the technology, experience it, ask questions with no risk to themselves. Right.
So that was perfect. And so but when they realized was that we could actually be creating these all over the world and democratizing the access. And so that, to me, that's what I've always done. And so Mohammed came to me to say that the super team had seen what I'd done and would I join the team and just make it a global effort. And I'm like, I'm on that.
So let me get this straight. I get to help people. I get to lift people up. I get to make sure it's inclusive. I get to democratize access to, and by the way, I get to play with the latest tech.
Right.
I can see where that would be appealing. Yeah.
And I think so working at Tecconnect and working with emerging technologies, I developed the passion I had for. I mean, you've walked into my office when ChatGPT first came out, right? I mean, you actually came in and you were worried about me because it looked like I'd gone down a rabbit hole, because I was just like, oh, this is what it's doing now.
Yeah, right? Renae, you need to sleep. Put the ChatGPT monster away for the night. You need to take a break.
Yeah. So being able to play with quantum was just like, a whole
nother level.
A whole other level. So I get to play in this emerging tech field that's brand new, that's nobody really knows and understands because it's hard, but it's been quite the adventure so far.
So for people that have probably heard the word quantum or maybe have a basic grasp of what quantum computing is, how would you explain that to folks? Because the terms AI, tech, emerging tech, quantum, it all kind of merges into this soupy mess. So what exactly is quantum computing?
Thanks for asking. So there's not an easy explanation for it.
So everybody take a deep breath.
Yeah, quantum science, and I'm not a quantum physicist, so I won't give you all of that science there. But quantum's actually been around for over 100 years in the science. Of it. Einstein called it the spooky science because it is things that you don't quite understand. And if you remember talking about Schrodinger's cat being in two places at once, that's kind of quantum science, right? So it creates the mystery around it of no one really understands it and don't understand why things happen the way that they do in those different spaces, and they can be in the same spaces at the same time. They can affect things like from miles away. Affect it. So the science is still trying to explain what that is. So we pull out quantum computing from that. And so when we talk about classical computing, we're talking about zeros and ones. So they're either way. They're
binary code.
They're in either state.
Okay.
Right? With quantum, there can be in all states. So they can be zeros and ones together, zeros and ones on top of each other, zeros and ones by themselves, zeros on their own, and they all are entangled to that. So I was actually talking to my son last night because I was like coming up with some ideas of how to explain what this really means, like in terms of solving problems.
Right.
And so I had one about being in a maze. He thought this other one he's going to offer you is the one he thought that worked better. And it's if you have that storybook and you're turning the page and you get to decide if you're going to take that path or that path, and then you go to the next one, you're taking that path or that path, right? And so your story develops based on the decisions you're making at each step.
Choose your own adventure. You're branching off through the storyline as you make decisions.
But you got one kind of route. If it's a quantum storybook, you're going on all of the paths at once. Right. So and then if you've said that you want an outcome of what's the best, like say I want to slay the most dragons till I get to the end and stuff, it'll actually do all of this the permutations of the story of how you would have actually picked which direction at which time with multiple variables and multiple constraints and come up with the best route to actually get you to the slaying the most dragons when you get to the end. That's how quantum works. It's all running at the same time. So now you have a model that can take multiple constraints, multiple variables, and provide you with the optimized solution.
Yeah, so again, I'm going to see if I can paraphrase. If I look at traditional software modeling tools, forecasting tools, they're typically looking at a pathway with a certain set of variables, and it's often very linear, one after the other, iterative, if you will, whereas quantum is all that and everything all at once.
Yes.
And so you're simultaneously solving multiple problems with multiple variables, contemplating multiple outcomes, thereby being able to pick the best one instead of running multiple simulations. You're just running multiple simulations at the same time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Very
interesting.
Powerful. Yeah. So it's changing how we think about complex, wicked problems, because we've only ever been in those two states. So we are the way our minds, we've trained as an industrial model of zeros and ones, essentially. This is this solution or this solution, right? How we're thinking about problems that we've always considered to be wicked problems are now able to bring all of that data together to create a different kind of solution. So I think that's what excites me about being able to understand the problems you can bring to it, because you actually have to start thinking in your own mind about multiple solutions, right? Multiple like how many variables and how many constraints can you actually bring together to consider the solution that you're seeking.
And if I'm not constrained by a model that can only handle 5, 10 variables or 5, 10 outcomes, I can contemplate vastly different solution sets if I'm thinking literally of whatever I can shove in there that my brain will conjure up. Is that a fair?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what's so exciting about it. And I think that's also the hardest part of comprehending that you can actually bring any kind of problem to this, and especially around quantum annealers. So there's different kinds of quantum computing, and the annealer is the one that's part of the super platform, and its sweet spot is optimization, right?
Okay.
It's really, really good at that, and that's what we focus on in terms of the problem solving. As quantum develops, we'll start to see broader problem solving and broader solutions that can come from that, but it's not as good at that as yet. But it will always be a combination of quantum and supercomputing and classical computing. They all need to come together to create the solutions, right? It's never going to be quantum on its own that will do that. And so that's why the convergence now that we're seeing is so important to understand of how all of these different elements. So the super platform has the number of different quantum annealers. So NVIDIA, IonQ, like we're chip agnostic.
I was like technology, chip agnostic. You're happy to work with whatever platform makes sense.
And so then it picks the quantum, it picks the classical, it picks it. So it tells you in what hybrid combination it's going to solve the problem. And the beauty of this is that you don't need to understand how to create code to communicate with the annealer. And that's what in big institutions has been now. If you've got a quantum computer, you need to have a PhD level of actually who's writing the code and communicating with it, and then translating whatever the annealer comes back with. This platform, you do it in plain language, just like you would just ChatGPT, right? You actually create a plain language problem, and it walks you through with about 13 different AI agents that help you further describe the problem sufficient enough that you're going to get the outcome that you want. And then it pushes it through to coding, pushes it through to the annealer that comes back, and then it's translated into written results. And then you can change up the variables if you want to on that. So it's a very easy, and that's why it's democratizing the access, is that now, as any kind of business, if you just have a logistics firm, or if you have some trucking firm, and you want to be able to really optimize your operations, if you'd had to go to get a quantum, it would have hundreds of thousands of dollars, right, just to have time on that. This platform, the quantum annealer, can be in milliseconds of time that's used to solve the problem, but in a combination that makes sense for companies.
So maybe we can build on the logistics of the trucking company example. Like, I think I've got my head wrapped around solving wicked problems, multiple simultaneous inputs, multiple simultaneous priorities, multiple simultaneous potential outcomes, getting to an optimized solution. So for the average person, like what's a practical example of what that looks like, right? So I come to Tecconnect, I sit down at this quantum hub, this beautiful screen, this amazing series of, I'm going to get prompted by these AI agents on different questions to contemplate. What do I get? What do I have to put in? What do I get out?
Yeah, so I'll use an example of one of the early ones that we did was with Save On Foods, which was with the early days in the D-Wave of really demonstrating what the optimization tools could do. And so they would have, say, 200 drivers that were going out every day delivering. So they have different routes, different
various stops along the way.
Various stops and that. So 20% of the drivers would call in sick every day. And so they would have to redo all of the routes. And often it could be somebody that's on the north side having to go over the south side because really they just assigned wherever that delivery could go and whatever truck might be there. So they actually used the tool to put all of the variables and constraints in about if we had to re-optimize for these areas, where are the trucks? What are the times of the deliveries that have been requested? Because all the customers have different time. So that how when you've done an order, you have all of those different time slots. So you have all those different time slots. You have all those different addresses and that. So it just went through and re-optimized all of the routes so that every time someone would call in sick, it would just go in and just do it. So they were spending hours trying to get to the best solution,
various models,
get it done in less than 5 minutes. Right.
Wow.
That. So that was sort of one of the first cases that could start to see how the optimization was working. There was a company that came in that was that works in livestock ranchers, right, with a lot of cattle, so really large, 100,000 herd,
massive
right?
operations.
Massive operation, and so they would be working with the markets of when to buy the grain and and how to buy it at the right time, and so they have someone that is actually looking at that, right? So when they came in and I wanted to show them how they might be able to optimize just that process, right? Because if you wanted to take a look at your investments or any of those things, you could use this as an optimization tool for that as well. I said, why don't, with my animal health background, it was like, okay, let's take a look at all the data you're collecting as a breed for a particular breed of cattle, like an Angus, right? So they have a certain weight that you want to have weight gain.
Right.
You want certain marbling. You want certain rate of growth for them, right? And then the day to the market. Why couldn't you take all of that data, put it with all the data that you have for the marketing, put all of those variables and constraints together, and then see whether actually buying at the bottom of the market on that grain makes a difference with what you're doing with the weight gain on the cattle on the other side. So it was like those are the kinds of two data sets you would never put together or even think about putting together to see, but now you have the possibilities of that. And if you look at transportation companies too, when you think about all the constraints and variables on weather, on road conditions, on weights, bobcatting when they're coming back empty, who's what could you be doing around that? You suddenly have so many more options of constraints and variables that you can be putting in there to optimize your routes of where could you be actually doing that. So it's like that, thinking about all the different problems you're trying to solve and how you could be bringing them all together to cascade each other, right, and trying to solve them.
Okay, so if I understand it correctly, your role as the Vice President of Global Ecosystems is essentially to take this hub model that you've created here in Lethbridge and replicate it around the world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I talk with, we now have 8 quantum super hubs across Alberta. They're going to be opening up in January. So all of the regional innovation networks, which are connecting to universities, connecting to industry, connecting to business, will now have a quantum super hub in their location. And so that brings the businesses in and it's around education and awareness, right? It's like, what can you be doing? The institutions like the polytechnics that are working with industry are going to need a bigger license than the quantum super hub has. The quantum super hub has a smaller license that you can come in and just experiment on some very simple projects. A research license or an enterprise license gives you much more capacity on like a Save On Food of like much more.
Not like any other web-based software. You typically have a number of levels of plan that you can subscribe to.
Okay. So the quantum super hubs are your entry level,
Right.
So we'll have 8 of those opening up across the province. The coordinators are going through the training now, understanding how to use the platforms and not being less intimidated about quantum overall, so they can have a discussion about it and not be scared from that. We're working with other cities across Canada to do the same thing, like in Waterloo and out in BC. Those are there. We're actually working with some organizations down in the States that are around their innovation zones. There's always quantum innovation zones. We already have, I think there's 9 stations in Sharjah, an innovation center just outside of Dubai.
Okay.
That's there at the START Center. And then we're just opening more hubs in India. We're just doing a launch on Monday in Calcutta for about 9 or 10 different colleges that will also be sort of integrating these quantum super hubs in to introduce that. I just met with a group of scientists out of Colombia that are part of an international organization that are looking at climate change and crop resistance in, like, there was one around rice, and because the temperature of the water is changing, the disease is changing for that. So now they're doing a lot more work around what's the resistance to that, and they're hitting a ceiling with their the computing the supercomputing that they had. So they're very interested in using this model for the research license. So I did a presentation to about 12 scientists who were over the moon, excited about getting their hands on this tool to really take those genome equations and start to put them into even higher levels of computing from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me that, you know, these hubs are effectively giving students, small business, independent researchers perhaps, access to this enormously powerful computing platform that traditionally would have been restricted to the, you know, large global business that could afford it. This is really giving access to anybody that really has a need and can, you know, can walk in off the street and book an appointment, essentially.
Yeah. I want people to be curious and come and explore it. That's what the hubs are about, because they'll expand your understanding of problem solving and understanding how to use the technology. Just like people need to get introduced to AI, once they could understand the access was easier. This is the same thing for quantum. Once you understand the access is easier, now you'll be able to get to it. And the quantum super hubs are all about the entry level to get to the greater problem solving.
So, I mean, this is I guess more of a personal curiosity. I feel like we're at a bit of an inflection point. So we have the horsepower of quantum able to, you know, solve problems that perhaps were too big, too wicked in the past for us to tackle, at least effectively or cost effectively. And now we've got advancements in AI that sometimes are a little scary. You know, what happens when these things come together and converge? I feel like we're on, it's not, you know, quite Skynet going live, but it can be very intimidating for people. So what's your take on this sort of rise of technology, and what are some of the risks, I guess, going forward?
Yeah, there's always risk, right? And we've known that from the beginning of the internet, actually, right? So it's like, we knew that there was going to be positives and negatives, and that's what we've lived through. The internet was our first introduction. Social media was next, right?
And so, we know how that worked out.
Right, and so there's always going to be a dark side to technology, and I think that's something to be aware of. But I think it's not something to hide from, and that's why I think it's so important that everyone understand what quantum means, what AI means, what it means for your everyday life, because it is affecting your everyday life, and don't stick your head in the sand around it, because it's coming. It's like if you wanted to stick your head in the sand for the internet, and people did, right?
Yeah.
You know, it was like, this is early adopter. I get it. This is early adopter time, but you will be coming along. So you might as well get sort of used to working with it, reaching out for it, looking at it, be curious about it, and ask questions. Because that's how you're going to learn to protect yourself from what's coming from the dark side. And there will be stuff coming from the dark side. That's just how these things emerge. But it's, you know, we know how we're working with scams. We know how we're working with social media. We know how we're working with other emerging technologies. We're starting to understand what we know is true and what we know isn't true. We need to continue to be ultra aware of what those things are in order to do that. And I think the other thing I'll say is that by being that, you actually can be included in ensuring that how we're adopting the technology is as it should be. So being informed means you can be informed on the decision making as it moves forward, right? So it's like, how are we developing these things?
Well, I mean, the example that immediately comes to mind is, if you think about, password protection, encryption, protecting networks, quantum changes, gives you the ability, I guess, if you're a nefarious actor, to really bust through passwords very quickly and to destroy some of those traditional security. So as a business, you need to understand quantum so that you can have quantum solutions on the other side to build up your defenses, right? You need to understand the movement on both.
You need that now. And I think there's companies now that are thinking that quantum's still 5 years out. It's not.
It's here.
It's here. And the data that's being collected by the bad actors, they're just holding it until quantum is sufficient enough to break the codes. So that may still be a little ways from here, and that maybe all that information won't matter once that code's been broken, but that's what's happening. So if you're not getting ready for post-quantum security, you're going to be in trouble. Your data is going to be in trouble, because whatever encryption you think you have, even blockchain, the hash, it doesn't take any time at all for a quantum to break the hash. They always thought that was immutable, right? It won't be anymore until we have quantum-informed blockchain.
On the other side.
On the other side.
Right.
So that post-quantum security is essential for businesses to understand that it's a today problem, right? It's a today problem, and you need to get on it. Yeah.
Okay. Now, speaking of access, I hope I'm not letting the cat out of the bag, but you're heading to Vegas for the Consumer Electronics Show. I'm a little jealous, because I've always wanted to go to CES and play with the 100,000 people that go through there. But I think SuperQ's got an app, or you're doing some work down here to unveil some things. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of what you're excited about Vegas for?
I can talk about, so because I'm just such a tech geek, going to the CES is
the tech mecca for tech geeks.
It's been on my bucket list for a while, so I'm thrilled to be down there. And we are, as SuperQ Quantum Computing, we have a booth, and for the first time, the CES has actually created a whole special section just for quantum and AI.
Okay.
So that's how far it's come. So
there's actually a pavilion on quantum at CES.
Just at that.
Yeah.
Right?
We've reached critical mass. It is now part of the public domain.
It is,
right?
And I think that's the other thing that speaks to that. This isn't 5 years from now. This is today. This is what's happening today. So we're there exhibiting there, and we are launching a new app that will be quantum in your hand. So we'll be having it for mobile devices. Now it's a smaller quantum access. It's just for, so my favorite use case for this so far has been, you have 3 kids in hockey, you have multiple schedules, you have multiple arenas, you have multiple people giving rides, doing much of those things. Then you're going to hit the playoffs. You're going to have all these constraints, sickness, and all of those things. Now you actually will have something in your hand that can optimize those schedules, right? So that's kind of cool, right? So now we're starting to make it more of an everyday usage, that it's not just businesses that are optimizing, but we lead complex lives.
Yeah, forget my logistics company. I need to optimize my children's movements and figure out what my week looks like.
Yeah.
But,
okay. But even your dad doing the cruises, there could be optimizing to all of the different stops, all of the things that you want to be able to do, the times and like all of the variables and constraints that come into that, of which routes are you taking, or where are you on the ship, or whatever, right? Whatever those variables and constraints are, you can now put them in to say
that's an app on my phone.
What's the optimal thing? So so we're launching that at CES. So we're pretty excited about that. So that's a complementary. Again, it's that entry into quantum, and now that'll lead to, okay, now if I can solve this personal problem, now I'm understanding how I can solve my business problems, and now we can get into more of the wicked problems.
Okay.
Going forward.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Now you spent a good part of your career not only operating your own entrepreneurial ventures, but also coaching entrepreneurs, that would pass through the technology incubator and the regional innovation networks. Now you're a part of a startup and an entrepreneurial venture. So has that been a bit of a transition, and what's that experience been like?
Yeah, it's been really great.
Okay.
But it's also, as you said, I've done a lot of coaching from the other side. When you're in it, it's way different. So and what I was coaching on was legitimate, right? This is some of the things you need to consider while you're in the business. now that I'm on the inside of that going, well, that's nice, but I have this problem over here, right? And so it's really given me some interesting insights. I'm also learning what it's like to be part of a public company as well, which is not anything I've had experience with either, right? So being able to, you know, be in this startup that's really moving rapidly, like because the technology is moving so fast. It's not even like the other businesses that I had where you actually have an idea, you go and you implement it. It's kind of like
there's a feedback loop. You test it, you adjust your marketing.
There is none of that with this. So it's running on moving ground, is like as I put it, and it's intense, and I am having a blast, and it's hard work to get it there. So we're moving as fast as we can to beat the market. We're still first in, but it's a race. It's a race, and there's some pretty big dogs in the arena.
Yeah, so I've got to think that, you know, a relatively local Alberta startup, you know, that has global reach certainly through the partners, but there's some enormous tech and software companies out there that I got to think are either keenly aware of what you're up to or looking to put some roadblocks up along the journey.
Yeah, and there's all of that because that's the competitive market, right? So
right.
So we're in there playing as hard as we can. We partner with those big players too because we're using all of their chips. We're using those platforms, and we'll see how it goes. But we'll be in the same room with all of them at CES. So I'm really looking forward to strutting around that a little bit and seeing what that looks like.
A little surveillance of what some of the competitors are doing, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay.
Might have to take off the branded jacket in order to
exactly
to go do some sleuthing.
Now, as you think back on your career, is there an experience you look back on that you think has prepared you the best for this new venture and this opportunity right now? Is there something that you look back on and go, I'm so glad that happened to me because it maybe didn't lead me directly, but it prepared me for this moment now?
Well, I think running the programs that we've done with economic development, right? Like I think the Women in STEM was a stretch. We applied for it. We didn't think we'd get it, right? And suddenly we had almost $4 million, right, of developing a program and ready to go, right?
I do remember the original proposal, and I was kind of like, yeah, go ahead. Like, we're not going to get it, so whatever.
Like, yeah.
And then the contract came to sign, and we're like, oh, I guess we have to like make this happen now.
Yeah, so that was, well, actually the original proposal I think was like 9 million, and I think they brought it down. And we were the only, this is the other thing, is that we didn't have any money in it of our own,
right? Which
had never happened with Western Economic Diversification before. They actually gave us all the money without us having to have a contribution for it. So then I was like running to create it, to spend, because you had to spend the money, you had to be able to do it, you had to, and that's where Mohammed came in at that time. Was okay. Like, I had already talked to him when we had created the proposal, but he was ready to run as soon as we got in it, right? And then I just had wonderful partners that facilitated to do it, right? But that definitely that program was probably the hardest to get going, and it was so successful, and that we managed to extend it another year with some, like the feds wouldn't fund it again.
That's right.
Even though
yeah,
it was
I remember
really,
that. Yeah.
And even though it was really successful, wasn't quite their play. We had the province extend it for a year, and then we couldn't find funding for it after that. So it was the biggest success and the biggest heartache, I would say, of not being able to do that. But those women have gone on to create businesses. They've gone on to do some other work in the accelerators. Like, we made a really big difference in the ecosystem to do that. There was a lot of impact from that.
Yeah, literally hundreds of female entrepreneurs went through that over the 4 years, and many of them have now built very successful big businesses out of that. Yeah.
And some of them have come back to be business advisors, right? So just really, really was just an awesome program. But it was a lot of work, and it was a lot of effort to get it going. A lot of partnerships built, a lot of talking about it, a lot of building out programs, getting the right people. Suzanne came in to we went through trying to find the right lead for the whole project. So a lot of human resources went into that and finding the right person. And then once you had the right person, it just kind of went from there. So
yeah, and I think for me that was sort of before COVID was really a thing. We had remote workers. Even though we were running our Southern Alberta program, we had folks in Calgary, had somebody in Medicine Hat. So for me, from a leadership standpoint, that was a really unique, really a first experience for me. How do you effectively integrate people into the culture and manage people that you don't actually see face to face.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this was before Teams was really a thing, like pre-COVID, right?
Yeah. And it certainly came with its challenges, right? And we learned a lot. But I think it also then set the tone for how we could actually do more afterwards, right? I think that whole aspect of that remote work opened up the whole business advisor piece for RINSA, you know, that we were able to tap so many more people for their expertise that didn't require a physical location, right? So suddenly we were able to do that. And even the Elevate IP program that we did, we partnered with University of Calgary and Innovate Calgary to deliver that province-wide. We couldn't have done that if we hadn't been doing this remote work kind of mentality of we really want to develop outside of Calgary and Edmonton into these more rural areas and making sure the IP was going to be out there. If we hadn't done that remote work, that project never would have evolved the way that it did.
I mean, I know I'm enormously proud of little old economic development Lethbridge partnering with the University of Calgary to collectively deliver a province-wide program. That's pretty rare, and I think it speaks to the structure you built and the examples, you know, the learnings that we had from every one of those programs feeding into the next.
Well, and I think also elbowing our way in, right? Because it's because in Alberta, it's Calgary and Edmonton does everything, and we're like going, no, we actually are part of this.
There's stuff here you need to know about.
There's stuff here that you need to know about,
right?
For sure, and I think that's what I really appreciated about your leadership while we worked together, was that you were always willing to go out, and we were in whatever idea I had, however crazy that was, or whatever stretching we were doing, you were always up for it to go do it. And that's how we became so successful in raising up everyone. It raised all boats, right? So it contributed to Lethbridge residents, to the regions, to the whole province,
right?
And then that lifts up Canada. Like we're contributing to all of that. We're part of only 5 organizations across Canada that were delivering intellectual property for entrepreneurs in small business, right? Like that's huge, and that's just something we should be really proud of.
I'm going to use it. I have to rewrite my resume. That was a good line. So, you know, as you think about your career and, you know, obviously these experiences, you know, we get a lot of students that watch this show, often from our post-secondaries locally, but also globally. Is there something that stands out to you as key advice you would want to pass along from your career? You know, with the benefit of hindsight, as you look back, is there something that you'd want to make sure every student out there is contemplating?
Yeah. So I'm like, take the opportunity when it arises. So it's like, take the chance to stretch every time. And I think every time that I've done that, I've been grateful for the opportunity. And has it always worked out? No. But when it does, it's really great, right?
Okay.
So it's like, take the chance, learn, and then take the chance again. So when you start to feel comfortable is when you want to stretch.
Okay.
When you feel comfortable is when you want to start looking for the next new opportunity that you are growing and moving forward, right? And you're always wanting to challenge yourself just that little bit more, that you can do just a little bit more, right? And so you start to think about what you might think is impossible is just consider what's possible, but also consider what you think might be impossible and do it anyway, right? Like it's like, imagine. Like it's even when we think about some of the programs we did, we didn't think those things would be possible, right? But we're going to try anyway. This is the goal, right? And we're going to reach for it. So if you ever have an opportunity where it's like, I'm going to offer you this position, and you're going, well, I really don't know if I can do it or not. Go do it. Take the leap. Just go after it. Just do it, because it's way more fun, and you grow, right? It's just it. If you start to feel comfortable, I think that's the end. Like I really don't. I think that everybody needs to stretch just a little bit more, and be more, right? Be more for yourself. Be more for your community. Be more of service. You know, what can you give back? And it doesn't mean necessarily that you're jumping jobs. I mean, I think, you know, I spent a decade at Economic Development Lethbridge. You were closer to 15 years, right? So sure was. There was lots of stretch within our existing roles and taking on projects. So, you know, sometimes I think our youthful members of the community sometimes think, oh, I got to do the next job. I got to go to the next company. And that's not always the case. No, but we could have, with Tecconnect, just done geospatial and just done blah-da-da. Like, and well, it didn't work the way we wanted. Workshops. We'll have some companies in. We'll do a few things like that. We were never satisfied with that. We always wondered, like, what could we be doing now that would be better? what can we do next that would improve this? And so that was the stretch. And then going after grants and talking about the impossible with a funder and seeing what you could get, like even the creative industries, right? You know,
right.
It's like we put that out there, went, oh, look, can we do a feasibility study? Well, we'll put that in. They approved it. It was great, right? But it was a stretch. We didn't know, right? So and Tecconnect was a stretch. But there was no incubator south of Calgary. We didn't have any experience in having an incubator.
There was no template for that.
We had nothing in geospatial. We didn't even know what geospatial was. We just knew we wanted to keep that company in Lethbridge. And then we had a data center. Nobody even knew that it was a cloud, right?
Right.
So the stretching had already started to occur, and then we just kept it going. But yeah, I think you're right. So there's that intrapreneurship, right, within an organization,
right,
of coming up with new ideas, new ways of doing things, and with technology moving the way that it is, now you've got so many more tools. Like, I mean, Charlie's a really great example of someone who came in as an admin, just running entry-level role, and then started building systems and automating everything that we were doing, running the business advisors, creating like Airtable, like masterpieces of metrics that we were measuring that we didn't even know we could measure. And she just blossomed into that because she had that mindset of, I can do better, this can be better, this can go. And those are the people you want to work with, right? That are always, they're pushing your limits too, right? Of what can be done.
Focused on what's possible, focused on growth, focused on bigger, better next. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, similarly, is there someone that's been a mentor to you in your career? Like, it doesn't have to be named, but, you know, are there lessons that you've learned from a leader that you kind of go, oh, people need to experience this or know this themselves?
Well, I've had bad leaders that I knew.
Sometimes is a great example of what you not want to be like. Yeah.
The one who could bellow from down the hall to beckon you to his office. I've had that experience. That was not fun. So I always knew about respect, and certainly working in fields with disabilities of respect and respectful leaders, and agency, people having agency. And I think that was one really strong lesson I learned working with people with disabilities, is that that everyone has agency to make their own decisions about what they want to do, right? And so and that leaders that allow that agency, and you were very much that leader and advisor. I always appreciated how you allowed for agency within decision making, and your leadership was always from serving and propelling forward, right?
Oh, thank you.
I really I always really appreciated that. So I read a lot of personal development books, and I'm always really curious about the psychology of our decision making. And when I decided that I was going to be leaving a 15-year career to move into super, I had already been thinking about my kill criteria of what I was going to have to move on. So I did a lot of reading, did a lot of writing on LinkedIn on articles. If you go back, you'll see my whole progression of what's it take to make decision making. What do you do in crisis? How does the mind work when it's almost locked on a problem or that? So
anyone that's interested could find those articles on LinkedIn and follow that journey.
Could follow that journey. And so the whole thing of how do you make a decision of when to leave, right? And so I was already primed for the request from Mohammed to say, are you ready to move on? Because I'd already been thinking about my own consulting company, right? Because it was 15 years, and I was starting to want to stretch myself, right?
Right.
From that. My other person who I followed for so many years is Joseph Campbell, who's a mythology guru, and he wrote Hero of a Thousand Faces, and so it's about myth, about the hero's journey, the heroine's journey.
Okay.
And so it's like the hero, if you think about all those ancient myths of the hero going to slay the dragon and getting caught up in all of the different things, and he would take that and talk about it in terms of today's life. And so one of the things that I took away from that was that with every challenge, so with every dragon you slayed, right, you transformed yourself. Right? You transformed yourself with every challenge. So when I think about all the challenges in my life, the what I have is what I've woven into that was, how does this challenge transform me? How am I being transformed forward by having this experience? Right? So that's what I always took away from Joseph Campbell. If you ever get a chance, his interviews with Bill Moyer about that, and that's what Star Wars was based on, was all of his mythology. When you go back and read through, he and George would sit down and talk about the myth, the hero's journey, And so the Darth Vader, the whole father, son, all of that comes out of ancient myths that are there.
Okay.
They're really, really interesting. But that was the challenge to transformation is the thread that I've pulled along from there. So even with the injury I had after my horse, where my arm was broken for a year, right, that was a challenge, but it also transformed me in ways. So I was able to take that of not, oh, poor me, this is happening to me. It's like, how am I going to grow from this? How am I going to transform from this? And how am I moving forward with this? And so it's a different mindset from that. So I always appreciated that mindset from Joseph Campbell.
Okay. So just to build on that theme, we're getting close to the end of our hour. It's flown by, so I appreciate you sticking it out with me. This show's called The Edge, and so I'm curious, you've talked about SuperQ as hard work. It's a lot, it's a stretch, it's a challenge. How do you then maintain balance? Like, how do you sort of protect yourself and make sure you stay true to yourself and, taking care of you?
Yeah. So that's a challenge, and I'm pretty committed to my routines. But Atomic Habits with James Clear has really, 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 really helped me a lot. Those micro habits of making sure that I'm accomplishing some of those. So I have my goals of being the most fit that I can be, of aging well, of taking time for self-care. So I meditate every day. I have a yoga practice. I work out 3 times a week. I try to get my 10,000 steps in. That's been harder to do. I can do the other. But it's setting myself up, and then my nutrition. So I've really been concentrating on that. And that was part of the bone healing that I went through too, but I've continued that. And so that maintains my energies, right? So I'm able to actually do a lot more. And I think, as much as it was horrible to have that accident and have that broken arm, if that hadn't happened to me, I wouldn't be in the physical shape that I am today to take on the role of SuperQ and be able to say, I can actually go do this. I have the energy for it. I just have to make sure I'm continuing to look after myself. But I got this. Right, and that was part of that transformation, that I was going to transform into being a better version of myself, a better aging of myself, and that I want to be lifting weights when I'm 80. Like that's the goal. So those atomic habits of what am I doing every day that's contributing to being the person that I want to become was a really strong message for me. And those are things I'm absolutely committed to maintain that. And if I don't do that, I won't have the energy to actually do what I want to do.
Yeah, because you could definitely have dwelled on the fact that, oh, woe is me, my arm is broken, I'm going to sit on the couch and whine and complain, gnashing of teeth. But instead you're like, okay, how do I change my nutrition to get better? How do I change my routine? Like, what can I do? Like, so just truly, to your word, transform all of the things about your life to propel yourself forward. And it arguably led to this next great thing.
And it did. And so again, you don't know what's coming, except that you're going to be ready for it, right? As you're creating those habits and you're creating those goals. And what I think I like about James Clear stuff, it's not necessarily about goals, it's the person you want to become, right? How are you personifying that? Like, I want to be the best grandmother I can be, and I want to have the energy to spend time with my granddaughters, right? I want to be the best friend that I can be, so I'm going to be making sure that I'm connecting with my friends during the week and maintaining those relationships, right? I visit my mom who has dementia to make sure that I'm connecting that family piece, and those are, I want to be the best daughter that I can be, right? So it's like, what are the micro habits to contribute to that? And I think his that was the best. I'm very goal oriented, and I love that. That really caught me from that. So that's what I do.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. As we wrap up, any final thoughts you want to leave with the audience on quantum, on anything you've learned upon your journey, or just anything, any wisdom you want to impart as we wrap up?
I'm just going to say, be curious. Go and explore what this emerging